start by just checking in and making sure everybody had a chance to review the letter that was sent out earlier this week. I know Amanda just talked through it a little bit with the shift in the recommendation, and see if anybody has any questions. And then I have a couple of questions for you about your thoughts on how to move that work forward with the family leadership team, and I can share the timeline. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions about what was in that letter? Okay, great. So just so you're aware, so that work has been introduced via email to the family leadership team. As Cassandra shared, we were scheduled to meet today, and due to the shift in this work and some other changes with that group, we opted to go ahead and postpone our meeting today, and we'll be rescheduling that likely in April, so that we have more time to get the right people at the table to start this conversation about the shared definition. That group has about another week to think about it, and if they have any concerns about taking that work on, we will discuss that with them. But assuming that the group opts to move forward with it, like I said, we will schedule a meeting at least a month from now, so that we have some time to get it on people's schedules and have as many people there as possible to start that conversation. So my questions for you about that are, first of all, making sure that you're aware that panel members who are interested in staying involved with that work are certainly welcome to attend. And if you want to let me know that today, I'm happy to add you to our email list, or just know that that door is open if you are interested. And then also thinking about are there other people that you feel like need to be either part of the conversation, helping to do the work, or providing feedback throughout the process. The letter also talked about how the family leadership team is working to expand. So to date, it has been made up of family leaders from state level family advisory councils, as well as state agencies. And we are getting ready to send out some invitations to some community-based organizations. It really is a group that's focused on statewide early childhood system level initiatives. So that, keep that in mind if there's anybody you're thinking of, but we are trying to expand it to more organizations as well as to more family leaders, so that it's really a representative group across the state and across the system, and across just family experiences. So I will stop there. I'm going to take some notes as we're talking and just see if there are any ideas about, really want to make sure that this group's vision for this recommendation, that we're moving it forward, even though we're having a little pivot to the family leadership team taking it on.
So Megan, this is Kate. I just wanted to say, I think we need to be very careful that as we expand the FLT, because it is the family leadership team, we need to make sure that it is family leaders that are on there and not make it staff and professional heavy. I think that's something we need to really try to stay true to. And I just want to make sure that as we're adding organizations to this, that they are not just sending staff, that they are sending family leaders that are going to participate and give meaningful input to the work. So I think that's a really important thing, that when people do want to join, that we make sure they understand this is the family leadership team, not an agency or state, director leadership team. So.
Absolutely, Kate. That's a great point. And I will note that Heather and I have had extensive conversations about that, and being intentional about, when inviting new organizations, that ensuring that they consider having family leaders participate and that there is an appropriate balance. But I think that's not only a good point for the family leadership team in general, but I think particularly for this work, that ensuring that families are very, very active voices in developing this definition or recommending adoption of an existing definition.
And to kind of add to that, just a balance of family leaders from our different parts of Kansas, because Western Kansas, where I'm at, looks a bit different than Eastern Kansas. So, and I know it is really hard sometimes to get families involved, just my experience with our district and community level. But if we could really try to get a representative of each of our areas, so everybody feels like they're heard and represented.
Thanks, Mallory. Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, we will switch gears then into the rest of our discussion. If you are interested in staying involved in this work, certainly, even if you're not, we will make sure to bring updates back to the panel. And ultimately, the thought is that once the family leadership team makes a decision about how the work is going to move forward and has something to bring back to the panel, the group can discuss if it moves forward into a formal recommendation or whatever the appropriate next step is at that time. So this certainly is not the last you'll hear of it, but I do want to make sure that I know several people had expressed interest in staying engaged in whatever form that looks like to you. So just feel free to reach out to me if at any point you want to get more directly involved or you just want to know where things are. Okay, so the other part of that letter talked about a kind of a pivot point for this group, and I also want to make sure that feels good. So we our co-chairs for this group and then the panel leadership had a conversation last week, and as we were talking, we have identified there are several groups working on family engagement and partnership at the state level, which is really, really exciting because it's such important work. But we thought it might help kind of clarify the scope of each group and like how we want to move forward as a system to shift this group slightly to more of a focus on family navigation. And we've had conversations over the past few months as we've talked about ideas related to family partnership that I think really speak to the group's interest in how do families navigate the system and what is that experience like. And I think there certainly can be some overlap between family partnership and navigation, but we thought that might help kind of clarify the focus of this group for the next few months. So I want to make sure that feels good to people and see if there are any questions. And then if we feel good about moving forward with that, start thinking about what are some ideas this group would like to take on over the next few months. And we're going to go back to our jam boards to do that. Does that feel like the right direction? Does anybody have any concerns about that?
Navigation is one of those things that when a family needs help, they struggle to find it. And many times that's when they become engaged and active. They have an issue that they have to address, and then they're looking for the resources. And a lot of times up until that point, they're not engaged. So navigation is an important piece, but where do you, in our world, where do I send them? It's finding those resources.
Any other thoughts on this shift? I think similarly to family partnership, I think navigation can mean a lot of things. And so I think this group has a lot of flexibility to define what that means to us and what that means to you and your group and kind of make our own definition of it. Okay. So it's been several months, but you may remember that we did start these conversations with a jam board. And so I wanted to revisit that. I took a look at them yesterday, and I think there has been some discussion to date about how families navigate the system. And I think there could potentially be some ideas that we might want to consider exploring further, or we can talk through some new ideas. So I'm going to start with showing our past ideas, and then we can go from there. So these were the potential, I'm going to actually start with the ideas and areas of need, and then we kind of narrowed that down into potential recommendations. So we can show both of those. And then I have a new board that we can start putting our ideas on. And let me send this link. I'm going to put this link in the chat.
So something that's popping out to me is this post-it that says, "In my dream world, our state would have family hubs, one-stop shop for all their needs." And it makes me think of the 1-800-Children website. I know for preschool, we've been requiring all of our preschool programs to be sure that their program is on that site and that they're sharing that information with families so that they're aware of it. I think that's a statewide effort that's going on right now. I don't know how many other people are aware of it or taking part in it.
I'll just let you know that the state is also KCSL and DCF are working really hard to start developing family resource centers throughout the state. So right now what they're doing is they're identifying centers that already exist. And then they're going to start working on building new centers. So a lot of KCSL people went through the National Family Support Network's standards for family engagement and family resource centers last week. And then I don't work for KCSL. I actually am a pre-art leader for KDHE, but we are going through train the trainer training on the 21st through the 25th. So we'll have some trainers now in the state that can train other professionals on the standards, so that we can start developing more family engagement throughout the state, kind of based on these standards. So if you're interested in getting to know those standards, I would invite you to go to the National Family Support Network site and kind of go through their standards for quality in family engagement, because it's going to become a thing throughout the state here fairly soon. And then they're going to use that to evaluate and develop the family resource centers. So just kind of a side note to that. 1-800-Children is great. I think it would be even better if we have physical locations that people can go to obtain services. And that's kind of what the goal is.
And just so everybody's aware, I put the link to the National Family Support Network stuff that Kate was just talking about. I threw that in the chat in case people aren't familiar with it.
This is Dana. Can you guys hear me?
It's a bit quiet, but yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm on the road, so I'll try to speak loud. But that was actually my sticky, and the idea came from Canada. They do have brick and mortar, what they call hubs. So I'm so excited that our state is looking at that, because as somebody who's like boots on the ground, I deal with parents every day that just don't know where to turn. And so we'll direct them to 1-800-Children, but sometimes they don't even know what to look for in there. And so I'm so excited that we might have some brick and mortar places where families can go and speak with real people and get the resources that they need.
Megan, this is Nikki. I wanted to point out that they can talk to real people with 1-800-Children too, to help them identify what their needs are.
Okay, so since you all have the link to this, I'm going to go ahead and just switch over to our new board for putting some ideas and focus areas for the group for the next few months, as well as connections within the early childhood system. As Debbie shared, it may be that the group feels like a recommendation is the best path forward. It may be that connecting with another group that's already doing similar work could be, there's quite a bit of flexibility in terms of what the group feels like is the most impactful next step for whatever we decide to work on. One idea that I also wanted to share that has come up within the system recently it came up through some family partnership conversations, and I wanted to just see if it's of interest to the group, is the idea of exploring an opt-in texting program for families. So families of any child who's birth 5 or however, whatever age could sign up if they want to and get, 2 to 3 texts a week, whatever it looks like, related to like early childhood resources, tips, could be connections about 1-800-Children's, about developmental health reminders. To me, this is a little bit like an extension of the weekly email newsletter, but broken down into more targeted. Obviously, text is smaller, so kind of quick little reminders and updates and connection points for families. So that is very much an idea, but something that there's been a little bit of conversation about how agencies might be interested in working together to explore if that's a good fit for Kansas. So I put that up there. Certainly, if that doesn't feel like something the group's interested in, that is completely fine. Does anybody else have other? Oh, thank you for adding Help Me Grow. Does anybody have other ideas for things that this group could take on?
Megan, related to your opt-in texting, again, this is Nikki. So Child Care Aware, through their contract with DCF, does something very similar with all kinds of information for parents. So they send all kinds of different text out relating to young children. This is Nikki again. So one of the things with our strategic plan that we talked about quite a bit was how difficult it is for families to navigate. And part of that is figuring out what resources are available. And we talked about how we have so many different websites that families go to. And initially we had talked about kind of trying to have a more centralized website, but it sounds to me from everything I'm hearing that some of that had kind of fallen apart a little bit. I know we're doing Navigate EC, but from what I can gather right now, it sounds like it's just taking on what we have in Kansas Quality Network website. Initially, I thought that it was to take on, like Help Me Grow kind of material, some of the information that's out there from KDHE, and just kind of combine it in one location. But I don't think that sounds like how that's going to work out. And I don't know if that's an area. It was an area that was identified. I mean, if families just had one kind of website to go to help them navigate, of course it would be better, but it just sounds like it might be nearly impossible to do at this point.
The one thing we're talking,
Oh, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's Lisa. I think the one thing we're talking about, I've talked about, on other projects, either with the ICC, our local ICC, or on our kindergarten transition grant. It's how do you touch the families and how many avenues do you use? I like the texting idea, but will that reach? There's not a one size fits all in connecting with the families. And that's to me the most difficult piece. You've got the information, you've got you've got the websites, but how it's media, which format do you use? Which one works the best?
Heather, did you want to share?
Thank you for putting my words together correctly, Megan.
Absolutely. No, it's a fantastic point. And I think it's really important to remember that.
I was just saying, responding to Nikki's comment about Navigate EC, and I thought that I was under the impression, I guess, or that my understanding was that Navigate EC was going to be that centralized place so families can go to that and then they get directed to the various places where it makes sense. But maybe that's something this group, maybe we need Javon to come and share more even. So we all have a solid understanding of how that works. So we can maybe make those connections among this group even.
Yeah, we can certainly coordinate if it's helpful to bring somebody in from Navigate EC or 1-800-CHILDREN or, any of these initiatives. I think if we see opportunities to make connections with ongoing or even work that's being discussed in other places, we can certainly bring others in. And I cannot give you super specifics on Navigate EC because I know they had a recent meeting and I don't want to say the incorrect information, but the description I consistently hear about that is that it's like it's kind of the connective tissue for the system and that it is designed. I don't think it can address every need for every audience, but that it can help make those connections across the various ongoing efforts. So I don't know if that helps. Again, I don't want to speak to the specifics in case anything has evolved and I'm not as aware of it, but I think that's still the general intent of it, though, is trying to address the issue that it's not the lack of information for families, it is just challenging for families to know where to go and that there are multiple places. And so how can at least ensuring that the information is connected is one step toward hopefully making the navigation a little bit easier for people. But we can certainly invite anybody to come in and share a little bit more so that we all feel like we're on the same page about where efforts are.
I think too, this really points out again, how important it is to involve the families that you're working with in learning how best to deliver to them. So, if you're dealing with a population that they can't afford phones or, then a texting program is not going to work for them. Or if they don't have internet access, putting this out on the internet is not necessarily going to work for them. And so I think that's where, yes, we do have families that are missed, but let's engage the families we already have and say, would this have been helpful for you? Would that have been helpful for you? What were your challenges? And I think that's the piece that we might be missing, is that, you know, in order to get more people engaged, we have to ask the people we've gotten engaged, how did you get here? And I think that's an important piece of this, because you can put all the information in the world out there, but if no one knows how to access it, it's meaningless. And I just think, you know, it's just important that we continually engage families.
That's also where my mind has been going, and thinking about this work group, like, how can we, you know, implement focus groups with the families that we're interacting with, or that we represent. And I also wondered if it was worth us identifying that, like the makeup of this group, like as far as locations, and the, you know, general families that we're working with, and seeing, you know, if we felt like that was representative, and if so, if not, you know, how can we make it representative, and if so, which of these things that are already going on can we sort of latch on to and provide, you know, create focus groups on Navigate EC or the Family Resource Centers, or something like that. So I'm making a few different points here, but I do think like homework for the group would be to, like, you know, looking into Navigate EC, Help Me Grow, Family Resource Centers, 1-800-CHILDREN, so that I know that I'm not familiar with those. And so I don't feel like I can make any recommendation or guidance as to what our role could be until I familiarize myself.
That could be one use of how we spend April too. Like if it would be, I think we could go about this a couple ways. I think certainly people can do their own exploration between now and the next time we meet. But I think if it would be helpful to bring some people in who can talk about some of these efforts, or we can gather some information to send out in advance. I think that's a great point, that there certainly are significant efforts related to family navigation. It's a big topic, but maybe that would be helpful to just get a sense of where people are currently with those efforts, and where there might be opportunities to say, like, how are you engaging families in these conversations? Do you need help getting more feedback on this? Or maybe there's additional work that can be identified for this group to take on. And I know Gail could, our other co-chair, was not able to be here today, but I certainly I would be very willing to ask her to share a little bit more about the Family Resource Centers, because I think that is definitely one connection point that would be valuable to share a little bit more about where they are in that process. And obviously there's a lot of connections to family navigation there.
And Crystal, to your point about doing focus groups for families, those are great. And those are an excellent starting point. You might consider forming a council with the families you serve, that you set up times where they meet regularly to get input from them if that's a possibility, so that instead of it just being, you know, I want to talk about one issue right now, there can be an ongoing conversation, and that might be helpful, because that's one of the things that they're going to be looking to do with these family resource centers, is have councils for the specific centers, so that they don't have a one size fits all approach, because, you know, a family in Wichita is going to have much different needs and access to much different services than a family in Dodge City. So I think that, you know, that's an important thing to consider as well.
Couple more ideas added to the board. Can the person who added the Western Kansas, it looks like it cut off. Do you mind can you fill in the last 2 words of that sentence so we know? It says the biggest issue in Western Kansas is that we do not have some local resources that families are asking more about. Oh, no, sorry. I'm sorry. I may have misread that. Are there specific resources that you think would be most helpful?
I mean, the biggest thing that I can think of, just off the top of my head, there's just a lot of things that we don't have, but like, we have just more and more families who have significant needs, like especially our early childhood. We in the past, we've only had one classroom in our early childhood where it's been more of a self-contained. Now they are going to have 3 next year, and that's an AM and PM session. So we're going from 2 class sizes to 9. So that need is just grown immensely in providing those early interventions. But a big one is autism. Like, a lot of times we're getting those resources. We have an autism team in our district, but, you know, when families see that they have to go to Kansas City, or they're coming from Kansas City, or, you know, we do have telemed and those things, but we just don't have local resources other than using our district and helping parents who are willing also to go through with that process. It's kind of a big example that I see, but there's just a lot of just resources for families, and maybe like some of these things that we have out here that families might not be aware of, or they are aware of, but like Heather said, no wrong door, I guess, just being more of a, hey, even though we don't say that we're associated with autism or will help support you there, doesn't mean that we can't help you with that. You know what I mean? To help kind of explain what I'm getting at.
Okay, we are getting close to time. So before we head back to the group, does it feel like a good next step? I can do a little investigating and see who, either if we can get some people in to talk a little bit more about these efforts, or if they're not available, at least gather some written information to share out with the group, so that we can kind of look at all of these initiatives together and then identify. I think also asking, like, how are you engaging families in this process, and is that an opportunity to help get some input, and see if this group identifies either some connection points or some areas that we feel like we can help fill in. Does that feel like a good next step? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding heads. Okay, great. I will work on that, and then we will come back in April and kind of decide where we want to go from there. Anything else before we head back out to the full group?
Megan, I was just going to say, I'm happy to report out on this.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
When we were talking earlier, I was afraid I was going to have to report out on what Amanda already did. So
I understand. Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all. For those taking your spring break next week, enjoy. For those not, I hope you can still enjoy a little downtime. Thank you for your work, and we'll see you next month. All right. See you back in the main room.
Thanks, everyone. Oops.